Another weekly episode of Fearless Flight Live. With me, you can see, and she is live and remote. Diane Hansen is currently on an overnight from the great state of Indiana, from which I emerged years ago. Not too big about claiming that because they call us Hoosiers, and we were always embarrassed by that term. So, and Eric also is on remote. And where the heck are you anyway, Eric?
Cozumel, Mexico.
Oh yeah. All right. We don't want to even talk about it. That's way too much fun
Right.
for you.
It's
And
very sad.
and Dieter and I stuck at home nonetheless.
There you
Dieter up in Toronto. Welcome to all three of you guys. And of course I'm Capt Ron. So tonight we got a lot of fun things to talk about. And we first always want to welcome you to Fearless Flight Live. It is, of course, a show that we put together every week for people who are afraid to fly and might know somebody to fly if you're not afraid yourself. And lastly, if you just like to keep up with some of the things in the airline industry and airline travel. It is becoming more of a necessity than ever before. Everybody seems to want to get in the air. We'll talk a little bit about how traffic is doubled from when I started in the airlines back in 1978 when I switched from being a military pilot to commercial airline pilot. Just a lot of airplanes, and with that comes some good opportunities and some pitfalls every now and then. So we discuss those as well. You guys got anything to report here while I bring up the slides real quick? If you got any news or anything.
Planes are full.
Yeah.
Planes are full.
Planes are full.
The airlines seem to have figured out how to put butts in every seat, as we say, a face in every window and a butt in every seat. That was our goal.
They have rebounded. They have rebounded for sure.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. And okay. Once I get my slide up there. So hopefully
We are seeing
there we are. And first thing we want to do is remind you about the Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather Facebook group. It is a private group and easy to join. We like to have as many in there. We're pushing 1,400 members now, and it has achieved what we call critical mass, where we've got a lot of people and it's self-sustaining. And we as staff here try to keep up with that. I look for questions and comments in there that are of a specific nature sometimes. And we find a lot of people getting comfort and being reassured from other people who are at various places along their path, trying to overcome their fear of flying. Tonight, we're going to talk about a free 15-minute phone call. It's probably one of the best benefits that there is to hanging out with us. And we're going to do some questions, kind of return to basics. I've accumulated a ton of questions, and we talk about that all the time, but I let those slide when we have interviewees, which we've had a number of over the last few weeks. And we'll highlight the next monthly live coaching webinar. We're going to talk about some exciting changes coming up in the 201 course if I get my fanny in gear. First thing, 15-minute coaching call, free, and it's available to anybody. And if you check with the other people, you know that it's rare for Ron to finish in 15 minutes. And I don't do that just because I am long-winded, generally speaking, when I get on a topic with people that I like. It's because I want this to be a meaningful call. I don't want you to feel like you just got off the phone with a used car salesman, and I want to have some sense of value when you get done with the call. And I get a lot of positive feedback from that. When we do the call, this is what you'll see when you fill out the form, and what comes back to me, it has information about you. And then I ask people, if you, some of the finer details you may not be able to see, how often do they fly? And you can see this person flies regularly, and they have plans to fly in the next 90 days. And then I ask them, was their fear generated by a bad experience or a major life event? And in this person, yes to all three of those. And then this particular person, I thought I would share just what some of the issues were. You can see that this person had never been a great flyer, and that's oftentimes, about half the time, people either had issues or maybe didn't fly ever before their first flight. But more often than not, people have flown and flew effortlessly until a point in their life when they either had a bad experience or a major life event or something like that. And I think that's one of the most perplexing things is how can I fly and then all of a sudden I can't. And so while it may be unique to each of you out there, it's not unique to us. We see that quite often. This person went for 8 years. The trigger was 9/11, and as was for many of you. And in 2010, however, this person took a flight, confessed to liking looking out the window, and they're scheduled for a flight home, and got a voicemail from a daughter who had been on a flight to Croatia and had a grand mal seizure. You can imagine, just I can't imagine what that must have been like for her. So everything went topsy-turvy, and it triggered her anxiety, which has been with her since that time. She continued on the flight. The daughter that was cleared by medical team and boarded next at the same time, she had to board her flight home, but the 4 hours not being able to know really triggered her survival instinct in there, probably the mama bear instinct to a great degree. But she has flown since. Her last flight was this past February during the storms that caused some of the turbulence that's been reported in the news recently. And people were screaming on the airplane. I've been on airplanes with that, and there may be one or two people that scream. And if you either listen to Glenn Carlson about a month ago, who was one of the flyers on the Miracle on the Hudson flight, either then or listen to him during our monthly coaching call, he said there were a couple of screams in there, but people basically, when something happens of any significance, people usually get quiet. And I think, but of course it only takes one person to scream to trigger anybody else.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
Well, remember Glenn's funniest comment when it was evident that neither engine was running? He said one person screamed, but the whole rest of the airplane snatched the emergency evacuation instruction card out of the back of the seats and started reading.
Yeah, well,
That's
actually,
what everybody else did.
What I remember on that was when they felt the water coming up on their feet, or when they impacted the water. But yeah, you're right. It's that, and that's a good point. That's when people, would, of a last resort, think, oh, now what was that they were telling me I should do if things go wrong?
Right.
And we do like to ensure that people pay attention to that. It may be the most important thing you read in the first 20 minutes of the flight. Not that it couldn't happen later on, but that's why we put those things down there and why we encourage people to do that. Flying is really unique. I mean, it's a piece of heavy equipment that you wouldn't operate on your own, right? And all of us, that's one of the most important things that Diane and Eric and I have undergone. It's these sometimes, overwhelming procedures that you have to learn, and if not grueling, to know what to do when that happens, so that we don't have to snap into reality and say, and our first questions are not, where am I at? Why am I dressed this way? Okay. We want to circumvent that thing in the realm of psychology, so that we immediately move into the next step of behaving in a prescribed way that we've practiced over and over. And one of the ironies of being a crew member is your emergency training that you practice annually for a flight attendant, and sometimes more than annually for a pilot, is something that you practice probably 75% of your time in training. You work on those things, and you never get to do anything like that, fortunately, in a career. So it's a thing like that. So anyway, that was a long answer to people screaming on the airplane. And of course, that's what stuck with her. Okay. And she started crying and all that. So ended up delayed after a flight, got home, immediately ordered my book. We would say that was a good thing, but that would be selfish to do that. And she still flies. Her husband's a very patient man. That's great. I love when I do coaching, even in a 15-minute call, if the spouse is there, or I encourage them to be there to really help get an understanding, because you all know, if you're afraid to fly and you're watching this show, people don't get it. If you're not afraid to fly, you don't get what it's like for people out there to get in an airplane and overcome your fear. Okay, so she just goes on to talk about things like that. And one of the best pieces of feedback I got from her is, well, she took the 101 class, which is one of the things available through our site. Listen to this. You made somebody cry, Eric. I hope you're happy. I cried during class when Eric said the only time he's put a plane on the ground is when a passenger had a seizure. Needless to say, seizure is a trigger for her now because of her daughter's experience there. But
I
Eric,
made somebody cry.
yeah, there you go. There you go.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
Oh, that doesn't seem real.
Yeah.
No.
So and she says this is an interesting thing. The classes themselves have also been triggers, and I got some feedback that I'm going to share with you from one of the people that was signed up to do the Glenn Carlson Miracle on the Hudson webinar that we just did last month. Okay, she's done all these things. She's got flights coming up, and again, this is just the information that people share with me, and so forth. So if you haven't signed up for a free 15-minute phone call, do it. You go right over here. You can schedule the appointment on my calendar right there. And even as we speak, I've had somebody pop up who just scheduled a 15-minute phone call. So do yourself a favor and get started. If nothing else, figure out that you're not going to do anything else and move on with your life and quit trying to fool yourself. This is what I want to say. We had this person just wrote me as we were preparing to go on the air tonight and said, I must admit, I chickened out on the webinar. This was the webinar with Glenn Carlson, who was seat 6B on the fateful U.S. Airways flight 1549 that lost both of their engines due to bird strikes taking off out of LaGuardia back in 2009. And every time she hears the details of another horror story, it just gets added to her list of things that trigger her. The point is, in no matter whether you do 15-minute coaching or you do a formal 60-minute coaching with me, or you come to the monthly coaching calls, we're going to first have you talk about your triggers and tell us the story that you develop. If you take the 201 course, the first thing we're going to ask you to do is write down your story. Think of what triggers you. And a trigger is something that activates that part of the brain called the amygdala that tells you that you're in danger. Okay. And so this person is getting ready to fly. So she had a couple of questions. She said, you offer 15-minute coaching sessions. I'm wondering if there are portions of the webinar that would be safe or helpful to me to watch. And I'd like to know if you'd be willing to give me some direction. I would be more than welcome, ready to give her direction. And this is a phenomenon called experiential avoidance. And this is what people experience even if they don't fly, but certainly if they are scheduled to fly and may cancel the flight or get on the airplane and then deplane. So it's a reality of people. I'm not saying to yourself or to you that you have to scare yourself. What I'm saying is it's going to remain a trigger until you deal with it. And there are ways to deal with it. And so we encourage everybody to, like I said, start with a 15-minute coaching call, stay connected with us in the classes. And ultimately, we'd like to see you go beyond either with us or somebody else and take a course, educate yourself, learn how to interrupt that thinking, learn how to change your story. If you can't change your story, your fear is going to continually bother you and be problematic. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go into some questions here that we have been fielding over. I mean, I get a ton of questions every week and I put them into an archive here.
Ron,
So-
I just wanted to a quick comment there from Bonnie. She said, Ron, you were so kind and gracious the first time we talked when I found you through searching on the internet to deal with my fear of flying. You spent of that 15-minute call, you spent almost an hour on the phone with me explaining your program, and I felt for the first time I can get help. Thank you. And that, I think that's the I think that sometimes what's the hardest is how do you get from that belief?
Yeah.
How do you get from that belief that nothing is going to work for you? Maybe it works for somebody else, but definitely not for you. How do you transform that belief into oh my God, for the first time, I think there's something that can help me. And I think that is the value of that 15-minute coaching call.
Yeah.
Because we do have a lot to offer. So
Yeah, and thanks, Bonnie. I appreciate that, and that's available to anybody out there. So the other thing is, Colette was a 50-minute phone or coaching call with me one time, and she wrote back the kindest bit of feedback, and she put a review on Google Business, which is something that people can do after they've had an interaction with us. And what she said was, which was funny, I may have mentioned this weeks ago, but she said, I couldn't imagine what we could possibly talk about during a 15-minute coaching call. And then she listed like, oh my God, we talked about this. And that's it. The problem with fear flying is it's very abstract to most people. It was abstract to me when I first heard about people who said, how do you get over this thing? Well, I didn't know what they were talking about. And I said that, and what I've learned from you all is you help me. Coaching is a really neat process because you generate questions and it opens up the world to me on, oh, that's something that I didn't know, that people didn't know. And literally, I ended up getting a master's degree in professional counseling because I was so enamored and touched by helping people with this. But the real education for me came from 35 years of working with people out there, with you all, who have told me what works and what doesn't. That I get compliments, I get feedback that what we do here, all of us, we help people reduce it to some practical ways to learn techniques, skills and strategies that you can use to get over it. And it's a crazy analogy, but it's like eating an elephant. You can't eat an elephant all at once. You have to do it one bite at a time. And that's what all the coaching and all of the courses that we've done have attempted to do. Try to break it down, to chunk it down and make it so that you can learn one or eat it one bite at a time. So first question, I think I've been hearing and reading a lot of emergency landings with the last several months. Have there been more emergency landings due to turbulence the last 6 months? One from a Hawaiian and one from Texas, I think. Okay. And what that is, flying incidents are so rare that by their very nature, it's interesting when they occur. And once they get picked up in the media, everybody's covering them. So first is the natural instance. What makes it interesting about an airplane? Because it never happens. It's the safest way to travel on the planet. But once something comes up, because of its uniqueness, and because when it makes it to the media, particularly if it's a slow news day, it's going to travel far and wide, as you know. And if there are any injuries or fatalities, they're going to stay in the news for a long time. And you know that. Okay. Finally, if you have a fear of flying, your radar is tuned to look for those things in the media. And when it picks up on those things, your brain says, see, I told you it was dangerous to fly. And that's an example of confirmation bias. We do that in everything. If you decide you're going to buy a new red Corvette, okay, what do you notice when you drive on the highway the next time in subsequent days? You notice all the red Corvettes that you see, because there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, and you tune it up. It is like a radar, and you pay attention to those things. If you're in a relationship and your spouse or partner or your friend does something that irritates you or gets your attention, you will now begin to notice every single time they do that, and it will be without relief until you resolve that in some way, shape, or fashion. So anyway, that it's the nature of how we're wired as human beings that does that. Another question came in.
The short answer to that was yes, about 1,000% increase, because the last 60 months there haven't been any.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll ask Diane. So Diane, when you're flying, you don't take you don't collect data all the time. You've been flying for over 3 years now, and so okay. So from the time you started, and granted, maybe it's too small a data sample, but because of the fact that we've been talking about climate change for much longer than that. But have you noticed any particular increase in bad turbulence or anything like that?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah. And
No, none, no change.
yeah. And so here's a question. Have there been more mechanical errors with planes in the last 6 months to a year? Well, again, I've noticed this myself. I've noticed that we went through a rash of these, not in the, we've had kind of a quiet last month, if you will. But prior to that, there was a 3 or 4 month stretch. And I say, see previous slide, the one where we talked about that. Again, they're unusual. And because they're unusual, and because we have a fascination, and largely because we don't know much about flying if you're not a pilot or a crew member. And so when they get the news, and then they're more likely to, one, get into the news, and two, more likely to stay in the news because and be spread widely. Okay. Same thing. Hawaii. What's with the Hawaii flights? Well, in 2 or 3 months ago, we all remember there was a couple of incidents. One was probably a crew error where they took off and they had a faux pas and descended right after takeoff and then climbed back up. And then there was that happened to be off Maui, and there was another incident off Maui where they were descending to land, and there was weather in and around the Maui area, and they got thrown around by some clouds there, or turbulence related to the clouds there. And another one that made national news was a Lufthansa jet that took off a couple weeks ago, Eric. I can't remember exactly.
Something like that. Yeah, in there.
Yeah, took
That's
off
right.
out of Austin and ended up landing in Dulles, just outside of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And so I think, what are your thoughts on the flight? Was there people got injured? Okay, I think I'll cover this in next time. Okay, yeah, and I wanted to go into this one here. What makes a pilot make the decision that the turbulence is bad enough that there needs to be an emergency landing? Frankly, if somebody gets hurt on the airplane, and it's serious enough, an injury, we're going to land. We're going to get them medical attention, and the most likely people to get hurt, Diane and her fellow flight attendants, because if it happens without warning,
We're up
tend
in
to.
the aisle.
What's that, Diane?
We're up in the aisle. We're not.
Yeah. So if it happens without warning, chances are they'll be up doing service or walking around the cabin. And that's why when we make announcements, asking the flight attendants to be seated. If we had some awareness, we will usually preface it by saying, because we want the flight attendants to be safe and in their seats, we have asked we're going to discontinue service and ask them to take their seats so that they have the same protection that you have. If it happens abruptly and the pilot comes on and you can hear the sense of urgency in his voice, it doesn't mean that he's counting his rosary beads or anything of that sort. It just means that he wants to convey in the shortest possible time that he wants the flight attendants to take their seats and everybody to return and fasten their seatbelts. So those are the things. When do we land short or at an alternate airport? Only if somebody gets hurt, or in the unbelievable occasion where we could not find any air that had moderate turbulence or less. Have you ever landed short, Eric, of your destination due to turbulence?
No,
Okay.
not in 32 years. So your takeaway, fearless flyers, for this is the airplane almost never gets hurt in turbulence. And Diane, which people get hurt in turbulence?
Us.
And
We do.
and anybody who does not have their seatbelt on.
Right.
The airplane doesn't get hurt. The passengers get hurt if they don't have their seatbelts on.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And you can imagine in the flight deck.
We're not kidding. We we're not out there saying, please buckle up and make it snug. We're not trying to be mean and nasty. We're just trying to keep you safe. And a lot of passengers, they may fly a lot. And so when they're not paying attention to the announcements and they just think, oh, I'm just so experienced. Well, I'm pretty experienced as a flight attendant. And honey, I'm sitting down and strapping in because I know what can happen. So yeah, it's
human. We have a challenge like that in the flight deck. When your job is to do something for which you practice a whole bunch of emergencies every time you go into training, and then they never happen. And then technology makes it safer and safer and safer. As has been the case with aviation, it's easy to get complacent. And that's what I think more often happens with people, business people who travel more frequently. They just don't experience that. So you tend to discount the seatbelt sign. And you just can't do that. It's too risky to do that. So, okay. Read an article about how global warming is impacting increasing turbulence on planes and made it more difficult, creating more difficult turbulence. I don't know what they mean by more difficult. To a flight, to a fearful flyer, it would be more problematic. So maybe that's the term that they were looking for. But I would agree that there seems to be more turbulence around the world now, but there's also a lot more flights. There's twice as many flights on a day-to-day basis than there was when I entered the airline industry back in the late 70s. And so that's going to increase your odds, or the odds of somebody experiencing turbulence every day, simply because there are more airplanes up there. And a couple of sub categories to that. One, the longer the flight, the more of the Earth's surface you're going to fly over, the greater the likelihood you're going to encounter turbulence. And with that, because the longer you're airborne, the more various air systems or weather systems you're going to encounter. And I've had flights 2 hours that we could not get out of the turbulence. It just bumped us the whole time. And I've had 6-hour flights that were smooth as glass. Including last year when I flew back from my longest flight ever from Doha to LAX back in September of last year. It was one of the smoothest flights I've ever had. And we went up over the pole, 16 hours. That's a long time to airplane. Eric, any experience that you've had, with the same thing, do you notice it's getting worried or more difficult turbulence, whatever that means?
It seems like it's more frequent and more reporting, but like you said, especially with everybody being pinned up for 2.5 years, the travel demand's tremendous. Mm-hmm. So the numbers of flights going out are great, and so more instances of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And here's a question I thought particularly fit in with the theme tonight, and that was, why did the flight attendant get on the PA and say that the pilot was going to land as soon as possible? And for this person, a little bit of background, this person shared this with me, and that's what I share with all of you. If you have something that happens, let us know about it, okay? Because then we can be more specific. And if it was something in the news, send us the URL off of the website where you found it, and then we can give you a little bit more definitive response to that. But anyway, when I already touched on this, when the pilots or the flight attendants get surprised by turbulence, they're going to react quickly, and you may hear an elevated sense of urgency in their voice. And it's not because they're afraid, other than being startled. I get startled. People have asked me for years, Capt Ron, are you afraid of turbulence? No, but it doesn't mean that I don't get startled when I encounter some clear air turbulence that's sudden and without warning. So when that happens, and people are operating a little bit more quickly, coming up with a response to that, they may say things that aren't as well suited to reassure you. And when I was teaching recurrent to pilots and flight attendants, it's one of the things I did as I learned more from people like you who might be afraid to fly. I encourage pilots to always add something of reassurance in there, like we've asked the flight attendants to take their seats. It doesn't mean that we think that this is going to be the next big one, simulating the Red Fox when he was always talking about the big heart attack. It was, what we're doing is just saying we want the flight attendants to be seated with the same protection afforded them that you would have. Okay. And
you were just talking about being startled. Just to add in a little something, I've been walking down the aisle in my plane and everything is smooth, and all of a sudden we hit some turbulence, and our instinct is go like this, is to put our hands on the overhead bins, and that may startle some of the passengers. We're just trying to keep from falling down. We're startled for a nanosecond. I'm not worried, and I'm not afraid of anything. I just don't want to land. Well, if he was cute, it might be different, but I don't want to land in anybody's lap. It's just like you said, it's a startle reflex. It's not a fear reflex.
And everybody operates by that same reflex. And so when a lot of people will say, well, I looked at the flight attendants, I look at their eyes and their facial expressions, all that. Well, they may be startled. It may be something new for them, depending on what happens as well. And they're human. So but it doesn't mean that it's cause for alarm. And turbulence does not bring airplanes down. But it is annoying. And that's what we try to have you develop.
And that question is unclear because we don't know. When they said the flight attendant got on the PA and said the pilot was going to land as soon as possible, if they were just going to hurry, or they were going to declare a non-normal, call it a non-normal procedure and get priority handling so they can hurry more, or if it was so bad they were going to divert. You don't know what that means when the flight attendant has said that.
Right. And so, and this brings up the other thing that you have every right to debrief a flight that you were on in which you became apprehensive about it. So you want to, I recommend that everybody, if you have turbulence or something and it was frightening to you, ask one of the pilots as you leave the airplane, say, hey, is this a time for a good time for a question? And then they'll probably say, sure, go ahead. They'll say, hey, back there when we were bouncing around and I thought we were going to die, were we going to die? What you need to do is leave that anxiety on the airplane. And what happens instead most often is we take it off of the airplane and now it festers and grows in the absence of information. So we're all about educating you to what happens on airplanes, to the extent that it would calm any anxiety or fears you have. So make sure that you do debrief that with crews then. Okay. What do I do when the turbulence seems like it isn't going to end and when turbulence is really bad? What I do, join the Fearless Flyer Club, start attending the coaching sessions, develop some skills, techniques, and strategies for coping. You got to learn more. You've just got to learn more. And that, what more can we say about it? You need to know more about that. Where would a plane do an emergency landing if it was flying over mountains or middle of the ocean? My flight from, and they had a destination that I took out, is over mountains and ocean. A lot of flights are over mountains and the ocean if you're going to go across large expanses of the globe. And what do? Well, Eric and I put together a special bonus overwater webinar that's in the Clear for Takeoff 201 class. And we just talked about it briefly again during the last month's coaching session. This is one of the most often repeated questions is, what about flying for long distances and flying over water? And again, you need to know more about it. You need to know why and how we protect ourselves. It's not that we pretend like we'll never have we'll never have a problem when we're on flying over a place where it doesn't have as many suitable alternate airfields. What it does is it teaches you how we prevent that and manage whatever risk might be associated with that. So Eric's has done a great job in the past talking about the details, the flight log, the data, the management, what he does over there where you might think he's bored. He's got plenty to do. So have you ever been on a bad flight or truly concerned or nervous about what your flight was going on any time of your flights? And I'm going to say this, I'm not trying to be facetious. When I was a new pilot, particularly, and in the military, where I didn't have all the support that I do in the airlines, you encounter things that are more unique. And sometimes I did things that in subsequent years I would do differently. So seriously, some of the most anxiety-provoking situations I've been, I created for myself. And we don't have time to go through all the embarrassing ones there. But let me say this, I got it out of my system so that by the time I got with airlines and I had a lot more experience, that was not problematic anymore. And we don't have the unique situations that come up when you're flying a military mission, where every mission you fly is typically different. Eric, I'll let you get any times where you scare yourself or been scared?
Well, no, I would say on the second part, being truly concerned or nervous about what was going on at any time of the flight, no. But have I been on a bad flight? Sure.
Yeah.
I've had just as miserable a time as people have in the back.
Right. And you're defining bad flight might be, tell me how you're defining bad flight, or to share that with people.
Sure.
You're not talking about the engines falling off, right?
No, I'm just talking about continuous bumps or continuous
Yeah.
turbulence, and I can't get out of it, and I can't switch, and I know it's fine, and it's not fun, but it's not a good flight, and it's not a hazard to safety in any way.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple like that where the pilots have said they've gotten on the PA and they've told the passengers, and they've gotten on the phone with us, the flight attendants, say, hey, listen, we're trying to find some smooth air, but we can't. And we have to remain seated in our jump seats for, like maybe an hour. And it's, as you have said, it's annoying and it's boring, and we have to sit there forever. And it's like, oh my God, is this going to end? It's not scary, or we're not nervous or anything. We're a cross between being annoyed and bored. Because it's just, we would rather get up and do something and take care of our passengers, but it's too bumpy. And so we have to sit there forever. So
It's like being a kid.
that's
and
a
having
bad
to-
flight for me.
Yeah, it's like being a kid and having to go to your least favorite relative for
Yeah.
dinner. All you want to do is play with your friends, and you got to
Right.
sit there and listen
You
to
gotta
the
sit
adults
there.
talk.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
exactly.
real quickly in this one, do inexperienced pilots fly commercial airlines? No, they don't. We don't let anybody inexperienced. Now, do they have less experience sometimes than other pilots? Absolutely. What constitutes enough experience? We're going to tease you with this one. Take the 201 course. You'll find out. We got a whole thing in there about how we hire pilots, and that's been in the news in the last year because of the fact that there is a demographic out there of old people like me, and I won't throw Diane in that group, but here,
Yeah.
we're getting older, and so pilots, we prohibit pilots from flying past the age of 65. When I retired, it was 60. And now they're talking about raising it to 67. And then what caused that to proliferate was, and be more serious, was the fact that the pandemic, the airlines had to dump a whole lot of overhead because nobody was flying. And so what they did was they came up with early retirements. Eric took an early out there. And so when they did that, they dumped a lot of experience because the people at the top with the most experience are the most expensive ones. So they let them out first. And now when they came back, Eric and I talked about this. If you listen to us during the pandemic, we said, when the airlines decide or the government decides that it's okay to go back flying again, they're going to have some issues with that, because you can turn people out in 24 hours or a month. You can retire them and all that, but you can't, even if you just furlough them, you can't bring them back and get them flying in the next week. It takes 90 days to get somebody back in if they've only been gone for as short as a couple of days. So that caused that. So again, there's a lot of, this is a very complex and very detailed topic, and we have more information on that, but you'll have to get
And it just, as Ron mentioned, it's not an easy process. I mean, pulling the ejection handle is an easy process mentally if you're ready for it, but coming back, not only does the airline have to basically start the person over from scratch, they have to keep all the pilots that are already there current and work all these people they're bringing back or hiring into the stream. And it's an awful lot to swallow, and you can't do it overnight. It's like turning a battleship.
Yeah. But the thing is, despite the issues with staffing problems and all that, why we have staffing problems? Because they don't get to violate those rules. The rules are the rules. If the person's not current or they're not checked out in the airplane, you can't fly them. You can't use them. And so if you have people that buy a lot of tickets, as Diane said, the airlines are filling those seats up right now. You run into staffing problems, and that's what's been going on over the last year in the airline industry. So it's because of the regulation and compliance, and because it's so diligent and followed so closely that you do notice problems like that. All right, so don't get trapped into worrying needlessly on that. We've got inexperienced pilots flying out there, and no matter who you are, pilots make mistakes. All right. And again, if you want to talk to us more, we'll show you how we do it the best. We have the best success rate of any industry out there when it comes to one, not making mistakes, and two, catching mistakes before they become problematic. All right, so this is a shot of the 201 course that I've touched on here a little bit. Some of the beauty of the 201 course is it's on demand. You can watch it on your iPhone or your portable device when you want, and at times that you really need the information. With this, if you're enrolled in the 201 course, you're going to get at least 2 monthly live coaching webinars during the tenure in the course. And you're going to be introduced to a whole community of people in the course, not just fearful flyers in general, but people in the course and those who've taken the course. Get lots of content. And then what we highly recommend, once you've taken that course, is to continue on with us in our Fearless Flyer Club and get access to our monthly group coaching webinars. The next one you see highlighted here is going to be Thursday, May 18th from 6:30 p.m. Pacific time and 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's actually daylight time now, so don't get that confused. And we're going to teach you how to actually build a flight plan. We're going to teach you how to create some flight logs so that you can chunk your flight down and take it from the abstract world that your mind makes up into a more specific task-oriented process that you can find things to do to either prevent your attention from getting hijacked or regain control over your attention. Okay. Let's see. This is just a quick slide on the Fearless Flyer Club. Dieter's will have all these links in here to take a look at that. And this is the app. So no matter what you subscribe to in all these courses, there's some free courses in there as well. You can access it through your portable or your mobile device, and it's really cool. We've been waiting a long time for an opportunity to have this so available for people, and there it is. So we'll check back in with Dieter to see if he's got any comments that are of an urgent nature. And I wanted to get back to this to really give a little bit more for everybody out there, make it a little bit more interesting maybe than some of the interviews that we've had. But we'll try to do a balance in the future and keep giving things. These questions, I could close my eyes and go back a year or 10 years or 30 years and have the same questions in there. But I know it's always new to somebody joining our group there. So Dieter, any words?
Yeah, the biggest thing is staying current isn't just a thing for pilots and flight attendants. Susan Miglasia also had a really great comment about the need to stay current as a fearful flyer or a formal fearful flyer, because most of us don't fly often enough, right, to keep current. And so that's why we actually created the Fearless Flyer Club. That's a monthly membership program where not only do you get the monthly live group coaching webinars that happen on every third Thursday, where we really go deep into one of the things that we preach all the time, and that is that the pain in your brain is not about the plane. And it's such a strange thing to think about, that when you're afraid of flying, how can the plane not be the reason why I'm so afraid? But that is one of those things that if you don't use it, you lose it. It's kind of like my French,
Yep.
I can speak French, except I don't use it a whole lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if it was really about the plane, there wouldn't be anybody sitting next to you on the airplane.
Exactly.
We wouldn't fly. And that's, as you know, that's going the other way. So stick with us and keep yourself current. We use the same procedures to help, and policies and techniques to help you overcome your fear as we did as crew members. Diane and Eric and I, we did it over and over repeatedly, using it so that when we are confronted with thoughts that require us to reach into that reservoir information, it's familiar with us. And that's the biggest thing, as Dieter said, it's just not familiar with the average person. There are so many unfamiliar sights, sounds, and sensations on a typical airplane flight, just a routine flight, that it's not surprising. What's surprising maybe is that more people aren't bothered by it than are. And when we hit some clear air turbulence, I like to say everybody on the airplane is experiencing a little bit of doubts as to whether they should have got on that airplane that day. But we land and we land safely, no matter what happens, and you know that. So anyway, all right. So thanks everybody for joining. Thanks Diane. Thanks Eric. Thanks Dieter, and thanks to you all again for watching us this week. We really love doing this for you, and keep coming back because it'll work if you work it. All right. So take care, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you soon.